All right, so the Alberta budget was released yesterday by the UCP, and like expected, they did have some cuts in there. Like expected, it did piss off the NDP and all the crazy lefties, which again is the first thing, the first good thing I've seen in a long time. Like with all this craziness going on, it is very nice to see the leftists triggered, and it's also very nice too to see, people that have it coming to them. It's very nice to see that kind of stuff, if you ask me. But um, anyway, the UCP released its budget on Thursday. Here are some of the highlights. No new taxes, which is very good. I do commend. Again, I'm a realist when it comes to this kind of stuff. I don't want to be partisan. I refuse to be partisan. This is a very good move, right? A very good move to not raise taxes. Um, Deficit of 18.2 billion on estimated revenues of 43.7 billion. That number is really high. I mean, that is something that's really concerning. But um, to be fair, the NDP would definitely be running a higher one. I'd be shocked if they'd want to run a lower one. I mean, the NDP would jack up taxes, but again, when just because the government, I mean, number one, just because you jack up taxes doesn't mean you increase revenue. Oftentimes, you don't at all. In fact, um, um, if you look at taxes as a percentage of GDP, the number is actually pretty much unchanged throughout time, even though tax rates are constantly changing. So again, just because you raise taxes doesn't mean you increase revenue, and a lot of times just because you cut taxes doesn't mean you decrease revenue. No, again, I think there's other reasons to cut taxes, but yeah. Um, Revenue of 43.7 billion, spending of 57.3 billion before expenditures on you know what and canceled crude by rail contracts, spending on you know what to be 1.1 billion, an extra 1.8 billion is needed. So again, like that's a way that if they really wanted to cut the deficit more, like again, just reopen. Like I don't understand. Like I really don't get their play on this. Now again, I know they're getting marching orders from the higher up. I know they're corrupt to some degree, but again, like if they sorry, if they really wanted to, again, they're worried about jobs and all this kind of stuff. Again, like if you're worried about jobs, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more as well, and you're not against lockdowns, like, again, I could care less about what you think. Um, Annual debt interest charges almost 3 billion. Again, this is another thing people need to realize too, is that, and this is um, another reason why I don't give the leftists any credibility whatsoever, because they're the ones that endlessly complain about, oh, there's not enough public funding and public schools need more and healthcare needs more and all this kind of stuff, but yet they're not concerned about the deficit, right? Like if the deficit hadn't have gotten so high, number one, because of the NDP, and number two, because of the lockdowns, right? Like that's the majority of the Alberta deficit is because of those two reasons. Like we could have like let's just say the deficit was half of what it was, we'd have about an extra $1.5 billion to spend on public funding, or maybe we spend one billion of it on public stuff and another half a billion on other stuff, right? And you get down to this point, public sector compensation, excluding physicians, set at 21.5 billion to fall to 20.8 by 2024. Okay, so that number is going down by um, what would that be? 700 million, right? That number is going down by 700 million. Well, again, if the deficit was half of what it is, which would have been easy to do if the NDP wouldn't have spent like drunken sailors and we wouldn't have continued to grossly overreact to the virus situation. Okay, we have an extra $1.5 billion to spend. That's double what the difference is here too. We could, let's say we plan to increase public spending by 100 million or 200 million a year. We could easily do that. But no, these people want to run massive deficits, right? They want to run massive deficits. Um, So again, this is the reason why when I hear those people complain about that stuff, I don't care. And this is the other thing too that I brought up too, is that I think the numbers like 14 or 15,000 public sector workers are going to lose their jobs. Well, the thing I bring up too is that number one, like I said, I don't care. Did they care when oil and gas, far more oil and gas workers have lost their jobs? Did no, it was look what the Biden administration did. It's learn to code, or it's learn to you know get in the renewables industry, right? They can find other jobs. Again, it's funny how that argument only goes one way, right? So again, they didn't care when it happened to the other side. Why would we care when it happens to their side? And the other difference being is that public sector workers are not, well, at least a lot of them aren't actually producing how much they're worth, right? Like if the government, like private sector workers don't depend upon the government running massive deficits to pay them, right? So there's a very big difference there as well. And the other thing too is that my guess is that the majority of these public sector workers, I mean, if I had to bet money on it, I would definitely bet money on it. The majority of that 15,000 people supported lockdowns. Meaning, again, at this point, like I said, anyone who supports lockdowns, in my mind, you deserve to lose your job because you're forcing other people out of work for no reason because you're a greedy a-hole, to put it kindly, to be kind of kind. But um, again, if you support lockdowns at this point, you lose your house, you lose your job. I could care less because you deserve every negative ramification that comes your way, in my mind. um, Heritage Fund Savings Trust Fund pledged to reach 16.7 billion. Personal income tax to generate an estimated 11.6. Corporate income tax estimated to be 1.9. Cannabis tax 105. Compensation for doctors to remain steady from 5.2 billion now to 5.3 billion by 2024. So again, this is another thing that's happening in Alberta right now. Is again, the left is overstating the severity of it. I don't know anyone who know. Actually, I know one person who knows a doctor who's actually leaving. Um, or I think they're actually talking about leaving. They actually haven't done it yet. So again, but again, doctors are getting a slight raise over the next 3 years. So again, like at the end of the day, I think it's very clear. At least I don't know the whole ins and outs of why they're so mad, but at the end of the day, my guess is that it would very much come back to the fact that they believe the leftist propaganda that the UCP want to privatize healthcare, which is number one, it's a lie. They don't want to privatize healthcare. And number two, even if they did, why is that such a bad thing? To be quite honest, like any doctor who wants to leave because of a system like that, like good riddance, to be quite honest. And again, they're never going to go towards a fully privatized system. There's no country that has a 100% privatized system, right? Canada is the outlier, not the states. People seem to think it's the other way around. 3.1 billion to diversify economy and expand aviation, tech, pharmaceutical, and tourism sectors. Um, Again, like this is something that the UCP talks about, and Rachel Notley always talks about as well. Is it's Calgary should be the Silicon Valley of Canada, right? But again, like what investor, what company wants to start a company in Canada right now? Again, why would you want to do it? I mean, look at California. Look at all these big corporations and companies that are leaving California, right? Like, who wants to start a company here? Why is everyone going to Texas? I don't know. Could it be that I think California has like a 13% state tax? Texas has nothing. Well, could that be the reason? Like, come on, like this stuff is so easy to figure out. It's not even funny, right? So, at the end of the day, like, what would I give this whole budget thing from the UCP? Like a C plus, B minus. It's about what I expected that they're going to cut spending. It's not going to be the sky isn't falling like the NDP is telling you. But the biggest problem with this budget is number one, they could fix a lot of our problems by just reopening. Right? They could fix the unemployment problem by just reopening. They could fix the part of the massive deficit by just reopening. Um, they could fix the revenue problem by actually being conservative and actually being a place that people want to come to invest and start businesses. Because again, like even though we don't have, at least compared to other provinces, like draconian restrictions and regulations and taxes and stuff, the problem is that we, number one, we're in a country that has them, and number two, we're a province that's going downhill, like pretty much every other province. Right? We were anyone with half a brain can see the writing on the wall that we are going downhill and we're going downhill fast. And it doesn't matter who's running things either, whether it's the NDP or whether it's the UCP. They're both pretty bad. But again, the problem with the UCP is that, like I say, the lockdowns are the big issue right now. If they keep prolonging this stuff, this problem's only going to get worse. And it's like I brought up too, for all these people that are complaining about not having enough money for this or not having enough money for that, the debt should be your biggest concern then. Because, you, again, like, do these people, are they actually naive enough to think that the government can just borrow money interest free? Like, they can borrow money at a better rate than most people can, but they don't borrow at 0%. Like, we have a deficit of about $100 billion. Again, it's expected to reach 116 by a year from now. And the interest is 3 billion. So we're paying roughly 3% interest on that debt, right? So again, people need to realize that the higher the debt goes, the more the interest payments we're going to have to pay on the debt. Now, how does the government usually do it? It usually just runs a deficit to pay the debt, right? That whenever the government, like the government doesn't actually raise revenue, right? When the government, when the interest on the debt goes up, what the government does is just borrow money to pay the debt. The problem is that in the long run, that only makes the problem worse. But the thing about the long run is that all of these politicians that are in office right now are going to be long gone, right? They're going to be long gone, so they don't care. So that's what's going to happen with the debt. But again, the point I'm trying to make here is that just imagine if we had very little debt. Like, what was it, like 10, 15 years ago? We had no debt, or like I think it was like maybe 10 billion, maybe 15. Like again, like I don't understand how these people can look at the debt and be like, yeah, if we wouldn't be running these crazy deficits, we'd have an extra $1 or $2 billion a year that we could spend as a province. Like just imagine if we like let's just take $1 billion. If we had an extra $1 billion and we divide it by the amount of people in Alberta, that would be a that would, the amount the people that are the working age people in Alberta, like what if we gave people more, maybe even working class people. We say people making less than $100,000 a year, we're going to give you part of that money back in, a tax refund or something along those lines. Like I said, like I don't really understand it. Now, again, the problem at the end of the day, the reason why this stuff is the way it is that people are so cultish nowadays that there's nothing that you can say to change their minds, right? That the leftists genuinely believe that the only reason that they don't have unlimited free stuff is because there's people in office right now that want you dead, right? There's people they don't want to give you free healthcare because they want you dead, which is the furthest thing from the truth, right? The reason they don't want to give you more free healthcare and free this and free that is because we don't have the money for it. And again, their response is always, "Well, just raise corporate taxes and bring in a GST or HST or whatever it would be." Well, that's not going to do it, right? Show me the data. Show me the data that says if we bring in a GST or an HST, it's going to give us $18 billion in revenue. Like, are you genuinely suggesting that a GST or an HST is going to bring us, and even raising corporate taxes at 5-10%, whatever number they want to do? Show me the data that says that that's going to bring in $18 billion in revenue. again, like I'm no mathematician. I'm not even going to try to do it off the top of my head, but there's no way that number comes even close. Not even close, right? Not even close. And again, the other very important thing of the Alberta budget that I haven't brought up until this point that's very important is um, Alberta spends more per capita than all the other major provinces, even significantly more than some of, like, I think we spend like 20% more per capita than Ontario, I believe. We spend more per capita than BC, and BC's been run by the NDP for the longest time. Again, Quebec, they're a leftist province. We spend more than them per capita, right? So again, like this is the thing people don't seem to understand too, is that yeah, we're cutting spending, but we're still spending more per capita than these other provinces. So this is the thing that, again, I understand where these people are coming from. I really do. The problem is that they're so low information that it's impossible to take them seriously because they have no idea what they're talking about. Like the public school teachers complain endlessly, endlessly. But yet they don't tell you that, yeah, you know what, guys, the government actually gives us, for a 25 student classroom, we're actually getting like $300,000 in funding for that. And the reason they don't tell you that is obvious, because if they did, the average person would think, okay, you're getting $300,000 for those 25 kids. How in the world is that not enough to run a classroom? Like seriously, how is that not enough? You can pay a teacher $100,000 and still have 200,000 left. Like you're telling me that's not enough? Now again, the reality of why they want more money is that number one, the unions want more money, right? The unions are some of the worst people in society. I mean, the people that run them, a lot of the people in them are not bad, but the people that run these unions are the biggest leeches and dregs of society that are out there, right? They're people that want to basically get paid six-figure salaries to do pretty much nothing. Um, and again, that's another problem. That's another rabbit hole in and of itself. But at the end of the day, like I say, that it's pretty much exactly what we expected. I don't know why people are so surprised or any of this kind of stuff. Like it's exactly what we expected. And like I said, at the end of the day, is that if you want to support lockdowns, you're going to have to support cuts, right? You're going to have to, again, like I said, like increasing taxes isn't realistic. And just because, like, again, we've been over this a million times, this is something that every single economist that has any shred of credibility will tell you, is that just because you increase taxes doesn't mean you'll increase revenue, right? Like, um, and that completely contradicts the whole idea of the carbon tax, right? Like, if the idea of the carbon tax is that um, it's supposed to deter people from using, excess gas, excess electricity, all that kind of stuff, right? So if you increase taxes on people, in one sense, it deters people from using it more. But if you increase taxes in another sense, it doesn't deter people from doing it. Again, it's a blatant contradiction. Everybody knows, and it's just a basic thought experiment, that if you increase taxes on people, of course they're going to be less likely to earn more money. Like if someone told you, yeah, you're making $50,000 a year and we're going to take half of it from you, and another guy's telling you, yeah, we're going to take 50,000 and we're going to take 60% from you. Well, a lot of people are going to say, well, what's the point then? Like, and let's say you're a salesperson or someone who gets paid based off commission or something like that, right? A lot of people are going to say, well, what's the point if I'm going to get more? And like, let's say you have your progressive tax bracket and all this kind of stuff. People say, well, what's the point? Why would I earn more if they're just going to tax it from me, right? So that's another thing people really need to understand. But um, anyway, I could go on forever about these topics. So if you like the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you could do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get. But like I said, at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.